These were inspired by the Earth Nature service today. I've got a little ring on my mic. Mike, good yours? Yeah. And as you'll see, this is St. Francis of Assisi. It wrote the words in 1182, and then somebody in Scotland wrote the melody later on. So this is number 1066. Back to the beginning of the song. Oh, brother fire, you warm our night with all your dancing colored light. Oh, sister, you feed all things in birds and creatures. Okay, now if we could turn to 2 pages later to 1068. This is a piece called Rising Green, and you'll notice that it's the words and music are by Carolyn McDade. Does that name sound familiar to anybody? There's another hymn she wrote in there. Does anyone know what other hymn she wrote in our hymnal? Spirit of Life, that's right. Same woman who wrote Spirit of Life wrote this, so she's got a good track record. So is what, Rising Green? It's kind of like Blue Boat Home. Like Blue Boat Home. rose deep in the earth, rising green to bring a new day. Rising green, rising green, rising green. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to the Community Church of Chapel Hill, Unitarian Universalist. My name is Eric Conrad. I'm a member of the Worship Associates Ministry here at the church. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived at this beloved place, you are welcome here. I want to especially welcome our guests and newcomers. If you are a visitor this morning, there is a special note for you entitled Welcome Guests and Newcomers on the back of the order of service. As we continue with reopening, I want to mention a few things to keep in mind. We are masking inside on Sunday mornings as a way of striving to be an inclusive community. After the service, we invite you to gather in two different areas. The courtyard is a mask-optional place for fellowship, and an area behind the Jones building, which includes the porch, grassy area, and playground, is a place where masking is mandatory. We are not currently passing the offering baskets, so if you want to make a donation, you can place your donation in the offering baskets as in the space where you enter or exit the sanctuary. Our virtual coffee hour today is at 11:30 and will be hosted by Rachel Rose. The Zoom link is in the weekly announcements and the Sunday morning email. Our minister is Tom Belote. Please turn off or silence any cell phones during our service to maintain a worshipful experience. We now have a Share the Plate for Habitat for Humanity, Kathy Ferranola. Kathy? Ah.
It's so good to see everybody. Home. Charles Dickens said, "Home is a word stronger than a magician ever spoke." And we can build such a strong, magical home for our neighbors in need this year. And COVID isn't going to stop us. Working with Habitat for Humanity and our Building Hope partner churches, we can construct a new home with our family for this year, a Burmese refugee family, Trit Hai, College Pa, their 3-year-old son, and their 2-year-old daughter. Their home will be in the new 26-home Habitat neighborhood that's being built in Hillsborough, the same community where we built a home last year. It will be more appropriate than the single bedroom they all share at his parents' home right now, and it'll be closer to his work at UNC. Our church has a long history of building safe, affordable homes for our neighbors in need. Since 1994, we've built 23 single-family homes, a duplex, and 4 townhouse blocks for low-income senior citizens. Working with us this year are our partner churches, St. Thomas More, United Church of Chapel Hill, Holy Trinity Lutheran, Chapel of the Cross, and UNC's Newman Center. Our Building Hope partnership pays half of the construction costs, and Habitat pays the other half. The Habitat family will pay Habitat's half back to Habitat in no-interest mortgage. And our families have to work with us for at least 350 hours construction on their home. So our work and our donations provide them with a hand up, not a handout. To help fund our share of this year's home, please be generous in today's Share the Plate. Please place your checks or cash in the baskets at the back, and the check should be made out to the Community Church of Chapel Hill, UU, with STP and Habitat in the memo line. You can also donate online at the church's website. We can do this. Thank you.
Our call to worship this morning. Oh, sorry. Hymn 38, Morning Has Broken. Our call to worship this morning is a meditation by Alice Berry entitled Children of the Earth and Sky. Children of the earth and sky, we are nurtured, sustained, given warmth and light from above and below, supported by earth's strong, firm crust. We build our homes, till the fields, plant our gardens and orchards. When we turn from self and seek to be aware, we will find holy light in human faces, in blossom, in birdsong, and in sky. Then earth is truly our home, and we are one with all of earth's creatures, parents of earth's children yet to be. The words for the chalice lighting are found in your order of service. Please join with me in reading them. For the beauty of the earth, the spinning blue-green ball, yes, Gaia, mother of everything, we walk gently across your back to come together again in this place to remember how we can live, to remember who we are, to create how we will be. Gaia, our home, the lap in which we live, welcome us. We will now have a musical presentation by the Community Church Choir.
While the choir is coming up, I just wanted to let you know the words to this hymn, since everybody sings it once and it's hard to hear. It's called "For the Future Around." It's by the words are by Wendell Berry, and the words are: planting trees early in spring, we make a place for birds to sing in time to come. How do we know? They're singing here now. There is no other guarantee that singing will ever be.
Good morning. Each week we hold in our service a time for sharing the joys and the sorrows that we bring with us into this church community. During this time, we invite you, if you've come with either a significant personal joy or a significant sorrow, to come forward, place a stone in the bowl, and briefly share your joy, or your sorrow. Let us enter into this time of tenderness and trust.
Hello, I'm Mary Hewlett. I'm chair of the Immigrant Justice Initiative here at Community Church. Many of you know about the work that we do. We have two huge joys to share with you today. The first is that Gabby and Oscar, the parents of the family living in the manse, and their two children, Sophia and Alberto, were able to rent their own place this week. And you don't realize how difficult it is till you're trying to do it. They have no credit history. They've each worked less than a year. They have no rental history. So getting someone to take a chance and rent an apartment to them was really a very big deal. And they are so excited about being in a position that they can move on into a more independent life. The other, even better piece of news is that the Biden administration has now issued the regulations that's going to allow them to bring their son from Honduras. Many of you know, if you've seen the video about them, that they had to leave one of their children behind in Honduras. And it's not going to be quick, but interestingly enough, the Biden administration in the reg says it will be free. So I'm not sure that's really wonderful news, because they've been saving money for this very purpose. So there is great joy in our group, great joy in the church, and great joy with Gabby and Oscar and the children.
I'm Aline Dawson, and I'm here to share a sorrow this morning. My husband lost his only sibling, a brother, on Friday.
I'm Jean McKinney, and I think many of you already know this, but my mother, Margie McKinney, who's been living with me for a little over 6 years, she passed away very peacefully on September 14th at home. We had the wonderful assistance of hospice, and many of you have reached out through cards and emails and flowers, and a beautiful quilt from the quilters. And the caring committee visited her frequently in the last couple of years, and Tom, and I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for the love that has come our way and the support. And she was very weary in her body and her mind, and she was ready to go. So thank you.
Good morning. I'm Bonnie Nelson, and on Monday night in the new gathering room, in a ceremony officiated by Tom, my son Matthew married Rune Chow Song, and we are just so thrilled and overjoyed. It was a lovely ceremony, and we were so happy to be able to have it here at the church.
Hi, I'm Jenna Kaizen. In May, my mom, Sharon, was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. After a long recovery from shoulder surgery, she had hopes. Her oncologist had given her hope that she'd go through some chemo, have some surgery, and go into remission. She has now gone through 2 rounds and hasn't been able to have the surgery because the chemo is not being very effective. And this week, the doctor told her to prepare that she has maybe a year. So.
I'm Mark Silling. This is Susan Heyman, my wife. A little over 3 weeks ago, she had a stroke, a subdural hematoma, and had brain surgery. And at that time, she was partially paralyzed. But they seemed to have fixed it, but they said they weren't sure that it was fixed, and they had to wait till last Friday to do a CT scan to see if she had stopped bleeding. And when we got that, it came out, and the joy was that her brain had stopped bleeding, and actually she's quite well. And so Friday night we went dancing, and then after that I got the first full night's sleep that I've had in 3 weeks.
Hi, I'm Jillian, and I have a joy to share. Let me see if I can do that without crying. When we did our foster parent licensing, at the end of the class we took, they asked that we choose a song to symbolize our upcoming foster journey. And I chose the song, Come Sing a Song With Me. And this morning, when we did our Zoom UU at 9 a.m., because my 5-year-old still likes to do that, that we started in COVID, that was the song of the morning. And I sang that holding a foster child.
My name is Susan Spalt, and I have a joy. The Poetry Festival, the West End Poetry Festival, yesterday was a huge success, despite incredible obstacles this year. We met in person outside, and as you may know, without poetry, rain is just wet. But with poetry, it's just a dramatic effect. Thank you.
The first stone that I placed this morning is a stone of concern. Sarah Clark Farnell's youngest child, Jillian, has been back in the hospital the last couple of days. And so we hold Jillian and the whole Clark Farnell family in our hearts. And a second stone is placed for all of those joys and sorrows that we hold in our hearts that were not spoken. Won't you join with me in a time of meditation? Spirit of life and of love, we hold the turnings of our lives. We hold the joys of projects and accomplishments. We hold the joys of families reuniting. We hold the joys of new children welcomed into this community. We hold the sorrows of grief, of loss. We hold those in our community facing medical challenges. Amidst the joys and the sorrows of our lives, we turn to those sources of consolation, the gift of friendship, the blessing of community, the miracle of generosity. Openness to what is and what will be. We seek solace in the turning of the seasons, the cool mornings, and rainy sky, and turning leaves. The lessons of nature reminding us that our lives are as well a part of this constant turning. With blessings and sorrows, struggle and success, joy and grief. We pause for a moment, connecting our own thoughts and prayers to that which dwells within our hearts. Let us take a moment to be still together. Amen. Our sung meditation this morning is number 396. I know this rose will open.
Let's do it in two parts. Part one over here. I know this rose. You can do the part. I know my fear. Let's do it in four parts.
reading this morning is from the meditation collection, A Long Time Blooming, by Unitarian Universalist minister Marta Valentin. Reverend Valentin is a New Yorker of Puerto Rican descent. This reading was chosen for how it complicates our relationship with nature and with each other. The reading is entitled, My Nature Walk. As a real Unitarian Universalist, I feel I should be writing about nature. Something about trees and rivers, or tiny slugs on dahlias munching away with their hundreds of thousands of teeth, wreaking havoc on my non-existent garden. Or maybe about how I get lost in the woods that I never actually venture into alone, because to a city girl, they are really scary, with foreign, unidentifiable sounds, not like the knowing rumblings of a yellow taxi passing me by in the middle of the night, or the rattle of a train under my feet. The kind of nature I want to tell you about is often disguised as culture. The culture of a people and place and the nature of a people and place are to me one and the same. The indigenous nature of my people is actually quite comfortable in the woods. The African culture of my people is colored by their roots in the motherland. The Spanish in my people likes to mess with the culture of those they want to conquer. I still have some forgiveness to work on with that part of my culture. And sometimes when I go out for a nice long nature walk, I think about that while I try to make out how my nature and the Unitarian Universalist culture can coexist, each complete unto itself, yet forming a third place together. Will it be a natural place to be or a contrived cultural creation? The nature of this particular search for truth and meaning requires a cultural adaptation that I might walk free, whole, and complete.
Always hitches on something. The words to the song we are about to sing are a poem by Wendell Berry, The Peace of Wild Things. When despair grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
So this morning's sermon is part 2 in a 6-part sermon series on the sources of Unitarian Universalism. 2 weeks ago, I gave the first in that series, speaking about science and reason. And 2 weeks ago, I said that I had planned to do a sermon series on the 6 sources, unless anybody thought, or unless you all thought, that this idea for a sermon series was dreadfully boring. And since nobody objected or protested, I'm going to continue with the series this morning. But since my sermon blurbs for the month of November are past due, they were due 2 days ago, and I hope to get them to Rachel this afternoon. If you change your mind, let me know. Or else you'll have more in this sermon series next month. If you're not familiar with the 6 sources of Unitarian Universalism, you can actually find them in the gray hymnal in your hands. All you have to do is go to hymn number 1 and then turn back 1 page, and you'll find a page of both sides with blocks of text. Hymn 1, turn back a page, and at the top of the page you'll find the 7 principles. They're not numbered, but there are 7 of them. And then, in the middle of the page, you'll find the line, "The living tradition we share draws from many sources." And then after that, you'll find some more blocks of text and a list of those 6 sources. Well, sort of. All of your hymnals have 5. First, direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder. Second, the words and deeds of prophetic people. Third, wisdom from the world's religions. Fourth, Jewish and Christian teachings. And fifth, humanist teachings, which counsel us to heed the guidance of science and reason. Now, depending on which edition of the hymnal you have, you may have a 6th source there. Spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions, which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. Okay, so how many people have a 6th source in their hymnal? Ooh, we need to get some new hymnals. And how many of you only have 5? Does it stop after 5? Oh my goodness, a majority. Well, I promise you that there is a 6th source, and the reason that is that the original 7 principles and 5 sources were first adopted in 1984. The first edition of the hymnal was printed in 1993. The 6th source was adopted in 1995, and then later editions of the hymnal included that source. So we've got some original first edition hymnals. Extra valuable. What I'd like to talk about this morning is why our faith tradition decided to add the 6th source. And I'd like to talk about what I think that source means, and I'd like to talk about how our faith draws from the spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions. To do that, I want to do a little history lesson to start. As part of the feminist movement of the 1970s, there was a part of that movement that focused on women and religion. This movement included both criticism and creativity. There were biblical scholars like Mary Daly and Rosemary Radford Ruther who critiqued the sexism and patriarchy present within most religious traditions and offered feminist theologies of rereading and resistance and reinterpretation. There were historians of religion like Carol Christ who looked to the ancient world and to mythology to resurrect the ancient goddesses. I remember a member of this church telling me about a trip that she took to Crete to learn about the role of the goddess in ancient Minoan civilization, a trip led by Carol Christ. And the 1970s also included spiritual innovators like Starhawk, who created spiritual practices drawing from European pre-Christian folk traditions. So feminist religious leaders in the 70s both critiqued and challenged existing religious institutions and also creatively created new spiritual traditions. Unitarian Universalism responded positively, embracing both these critiques and these innovations. In 1977, the year I was born, there was a landmark resolution on women and religion passed at the UU General Assembly. Now, sometimes resolutions don't really change things, and they sit around and nobody pays attention to them, but this one did change. This resolution had to do with encouraging women's religious leadership and reforming our faith in ways that made it less patriarchal. Consider this. In 1977, the year of that resolution, the typical UU minister looked like me. I don't mean handsome. I mean a guy. In fact, in 1977, 95% of UU ministers were men. 22 years later, in 1999, my friend Rebecca Cohen was ordained, and with her ordination, Unitarian Universalism achieved a 50-50 male-female split. Change in, if you think about institutions and how slow they've changed, ours changed in just a little over 2 decades. In less than a generation, the UU ministry achieved at least numerical gender equity. But that wasn't the only change. In 1985, the Unitarian Universalist Association released a new adult curriculum called Cakes for the Queen of Heaven. Cakes was a class for women on feminist spirituality that synthesized the work of all those feminist theologians and historians of religion and spiritual innovators I mentioned earlier. The title of the curriculum, I love this, Cakes for the Queen of Heaven, is actually drawn from the Bible, a passage from the book of Jeremiah, where the prophet Jeremiah commands the women of a city not to bake cakes for the Queen of Heaven. So that's what the UUA decided to title the curriculum. Don't tell us what to do. I'm interested, who were UUs back in the 80s and 90s who took Cakes for the Queen of Heaven? Anybody? We got some hands. All right, look at that. One of those days I should talk with you all at coffee hour. It would be hard to overemphasize the transformation that our faith went through following this Women and Religion resolution. Consider this paragraph from an article about the significance of that. Quote, along with more women in the pulpit, feminist theology has reshaped the tone of both UU worship and religious education. Many of the new worship forms designed by women and religion groups, such as the Gathering of Waters ceremony, lighting the chalice in worship, and sharing joys and sorrows, have been so wholly embraced by churches that UUs are often surprised to discover their relatively recent and feminist origins. So it's those parts of worship that we treasure and are used to. It's the way we've always done things, actually came from innovations in the early 80s about how to change the shape of this faith. And so I think it's fair to say that the addition of that sixth source, spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature, I think of it as the culmination of this time and this movement, this time of both critique and creativity in the broader religious sphere and within Unitarian Universalism. So what exactly is an earth-based tradition? We might think of earth-based traditions as including indigenous religious traditions from around the globe, from the Native Americans and First Peoples, everything from the Iroquois and Cherokee to the Inuit and Hawaiian Polynesian religions. It would also include the religious practices of Amazonian tribes, the Maori people of Oceania, and African folk religions. Earth-based traditions also include pre-Christian European pagan traditions, including Celtic, Norse, and Druidic mythology. Earth-based traditions would also include various modern forms of neo-paganism and Wicca. And earth-based traditions might also include forms of natural theology, from the transcendentalism of Emerson to John Muir to poets like Mary Oliver and Wendell Berry. And that's just one of the 6 sources. Whew. So I want to ask instead what this source has to teach us. What thread can we possibly draw through transcendentalism, Navajo religion, the conservation movement, the cult of the Minoan goddess, calling the 4 directions in Wicca, cakes for the Queen of Heaven, and the poetry of Wendell Berry? What links all of these? I think all of these have to do deep down with a yearning and a desire for balance. They have to do with an awareness that the life we're living is out of alignment in so many ways, with our relationship with the natural world and with our culture. And there is a deep yearning, a deep religious desire to rediscover, to regain some sense of balance in the world. I think of Thoreau, who famously wrote, "I wish to learn what life has to teach, and not when I come to die discover that I have not lived. I do not wish to live what is not life. Living is so dear." Thoreau, though many of us criticize him today, is known for his beautiful accounts of nature while traveling around New England, but he's also known as a fierce, fierce critic of many of the ways our country was profoundly out of balance during the time he lived. He was a critic of slavery. He was a critic of the wars of expansion, the Mexican-American War. He worried about the dehumanizing influences of the Industrial Revolution. And for him, turning to nature was a way of imagining a more balanced world. Wendell Berry famously wrote those words that the choir so beautifully and elegantly sung this morning. "When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds." There is this sense that life is out of balance, and so there is this turning to the earth to regain that sense of balance. I think of a creative movie came out in the 1980s. How many people remember the movie called Koyaanisqatsi? Anybody remember Koyaanisqatsi? Koyaanisqatsi, it's a Hopi word. I believe it's a Hopi word that means life out of balance. And the movie begins with these beautiful, and there's no words to it. There's just music of Philip Glass. I should have told Glenn I'd be mentioning it so we could have some Philip Glass this morning. But it begins with these beautiful, time-lapse photos of canyons and the landscape in the American Southwest, and then it switches and becomes kind of time-lapse photos of urban scenes, and the music swells, and you find this word, life out of balance. Or I think of that Marta Valentin reading that Eric shared, My Nature Walk. For Marta, there is this desire to find a balance in all of her identities in this faith. And she plays with that idea of nature and culture and how to create that sense of balance and equilibrium. And the Women in Religion resolution passed by the Unitarian Universalist Association in 1997 said that our faith was out of balance between male and female. Listen to that deep desire for balance in our sixth source. The spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. Our sixth source calls on us when we feel life is out of balance, to find the spiritual sources within and the courage within to regain that balance. So whether you are a person who calls the four directions, or digs the poetry of Mary Oliver, or enjoys learning about the ancient Minoan goddesses on Crete, or turns to books and hymns and art that celebrate nature, recognize that desire for life in balance, that source of our faith that our sixth source speaks of. The closing hymn this morning is a hymn about turning to nature to find that balance. It's one of my favorite hymns in our hymnal. It is number 4, I Brought My Spirit to the Sea. And I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we sing our closing hymn.
I brought my spirit to the sea. I stood upon the shore. I gazed upon infinity. I heard the waters roar. And then there came a sense of peace. Some whisper calmed my soul. Some ancient mystery of stars that made my spirit. I brought my spirit to the trees that loomed against the sky. I touched each wandering windless breeze to know if God was mine. And then I felt that inner flame that fiercely burned my tears. A bright heart rose from bended knee to meet the asking ears.
Please join with me in saying the words for the extinguishing of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. As a reminder, before we sing Shalom, there is an offering basket near the entrance. And if you are making a contribution to today's Share the Plate, please write STP in the memo line of your check. Now let's sing Shalom.